I just wanted to give a quick introduction to who I am and why I'm doing this. And so I just thought I'd begin by talking a little bit about how I got into this being mindfulness and meditation. And frankly, I've been doing this for a long time. I say in my bio it's 30 years, but I'm trying to make myself seem younger. I think it's longer than that. And I started actually through a mail order course in Chicago. And so the practice was pretty consistent with what people are doing today. How many of you do mindfulness practices? Okay, so there's a couple, 3, 4 here who do. One of the things that became kind of intriguing to me was to approach this all as an experiment. I know that we live in an age where there's mindfulness soda pop and there's mindfulness applications and there's, everything, breakfast cereal. And so the real practice itself, though, is a kind of form of investigation as a way to kind of explore ourselves. And by exploring ourselves, getting to know what our weaknesses and our strengths are, and being able, I think, to field what life sends us. And so passing that down to our students, I think, is really essential. So a couple of times I made some changes in my PowerPoint, and it didn't pop up. So I'm going to throw some quotes at you that seem germane to what I'm talking about that didn't make it onto the PowerPoint that I think are useful. Anyhow, I don't want to tell you my biography in any excruciating detail, but I will say that as a teacher, I became really aware of a kind of rift between what I did for an occupation and what I did as a meditator. And I slowly began incorporating meditative practices into the classroom. I teach a class in oral communication, which is really high stress. Students do not want to take my class. I mean, it's the last thing they want to take, in fact. And you've probably heard the national surveys that said that people would rather die in a car crash or a plane wreck than take it. So anyhow, I became aware of that, and I slowly started integrating it into my classroom. And it started with yoga, actually, and this very subtle yoga. I didn't even call it yoga. But just, okay, if you could stand with your feet apart and just think of yourself as a mountain. And we do this before class. And so as time went on, I decided to incorporate more and more of these practices into my classroom. And so now with COM 101, we begin every class with this. Not this big bell, because this would probably be too much. But the idea is to kind of mark transition points in the day. And of course, any moment is a transition point. We're transitioning right now. And so, but from getting from the hallway into the classroom is a major transition point, I think. And students have their cell phones open, and as soon as there's a break, they'll get their cell phones out again. And so I'll just give you this first simple practice. And actually the thing I use in class is a little block with a piece of rounded steel on it. It makes a very high ding. So the exercise is this, and this works great with children, I think, as well, is simply listening. So listening I'll just do it, and you can listen. So the idea is just, you can close your eyes or not. And this bell has really got quite a rich resonance to it. And so I'll just say, listen as long as you can, as long as you hear it. And then once you can no longer hear, either raise your hand, and this will indicate to me that it's time to get on to something else, or open your eyes if they're closed. So this is the bell practice that marks the transition of the days. So just focusing on that sound. I'm guessing most of you can't hear it anymore. I can, but I'm really close to it. So interestingly, students really come to like it. And if I forget, they'll remind me sometimes, bell, bell. And so what started off being for me kind of a high stressful situation, bringing this stuff in the classroom, I felt really vulnerable doing this. I would drive to class and it's like, I got to turn around, I can't do this. So has become something that's been very kind of nicely integrated into the classroom, which is what I want to talk about today. The integration of these mindful practices into the classroom. And if you don't have a practice, maybe suggesting that you might try a couple of these out on your own. Very simple in theory, very hard in practice sometimes, but if you can approach it possibly as an experiment. So the roadmap is this. I want to talk a little bit about stress and neuroscience. You've been reading probably a lot about this. It's popping up in the papers in terms of mindfulness being kind of a panacea for everything, which really probably isn't the case. But it certainly can help both teachers and students deal with the stresses. And I'll talk a little bit about what those are, and I'm sure you're very mindful of them yourself. Talk about how mindfulness kind of can serve as an intervention between stress and teaching and being a kid and being a parent. And simple practices that you might incorporate into your lives and into your classrooms. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I've got a bunch of resources as well that I can share with you. So, if only 'twere so. So, it's true, of course. There's no debating that stress is dessert spelled backwards, but that's about as far as the connection goes. And so one of the things about mindfulness, though, is that it allows you to work with stress in a way that doesn't create more stress. And so it's not like your stress level is going to change. There are external circumstances, for example, that we have no control over. In fact, we have no control over a lot. And so, but this helps us to kind of, there's a book I love called The Art of Fielding, and it's about baseball, and it's about that next pitch, just waiting for that next pitch. And so you're out in the field and you're waiting for that ball to come, and you don't know what life is going to throw you. But hopefully when it comes, you'll be better equipped to deal with it. And to deal with it in a way that you feel good about, so working with your intentions and so forth. So to borrow from Brené Brown, the way we often deal with stress is unproductive, to put it mildly. So we over-medicate, we overeat, we're stressed by financial situations. I just had a long talk yesterday with my kids. I call them my students, my kids. And they were talking about the economic conditions of college and having to move on and all the money they're spending already. And I work at a community college and work. And so this is a woman who is, you can't quite make it out, biting her computer, which is probably unproductive, right? It might release stress for a moment, but is probably unproductive. And so you're laughing because you know it's true, right? I mean, it's like you see one of the things that's really become a major force in our classroom and outside has been changes in technology. And so every time, like I said earlier, there's a break, kids will turn to their cell phones. What's on my cell phone? What's on my cell phone? And studies have proven that one of the things that happens when you get on your cell phone and you check Facebook, we actually did this as an experiment yesterday because I have a student in one of my classes who's relentless. Emily? And it's like 3 times a day. And so we did a breathing exercise, which we'll do shortly. And I asked them to self-assess, how are you feeling now? And then I had them take out their cell phones. And I said, just do what you want to for 5 minutes. And the reports that came back were, one guy got really mad. He got a text from somebody that he wasn't expecting, and he was all upset. But the likely response is that I feel frustrated. I feel anxious. And so it's interesting. We turn to this in a way, but the actual experience with the technology is one of frustration oftentimes and anxiety. So you might want to try this as an experiment for yourself. So more and more research has been done in trying to understand how technology is impacting the mind. This is one of several books. Larry Rosen, this is actually a few years old now, came out with a book called Eye Disorder, and his opinion was that, in fact, internet technology, internet addiction is a real problem, and it's something that we have to confront. And so there's a movement with the DSM. I know they made note of it in the most recent one, that this is an area for further study. But there's more and more of a movement to make it into a full-fledged disorder. So one of the things that's kind of propelled all this has been the neuroscience that's been going on, thanks largely to the fMRIs, which is able to watch the brain as it's exposed to various stimuli. And so we can see which areas of the brain ignite when, for example, you're shown a picture of a flower and then a snake and so on. And so this has really helped propel the literature. And the understanding of it, this is what we have. This is our working, this is our machine. This is what kind of drives us. And so, and I don't want to villainize this because it's just part of of who we are as human beings, but the amygdala, which is really kind of close to our core brain, is that area of the brain that tends to ignite the fight or flight syndrome. And so if we're constantly on anxious alert, it's going to grow. It's going to get bigger. So they've actually been able to measure that. And with meditation, it's able to shrink. And what it does, feel free, what it does basically is kind of scan for threat. And it does other things as well. It helps with cognition and so on. But this is the thing that is most interesting to people who work with mindfulness. And so if, for example, you're walking on in your lawn, you see a coiled up thing, you might go, snake, and respond accordingly, because the amygdala will shoot through your body cortisol, which is, will help us to fight, flight, or freeze, just hang on for more information. So cortisol is one, and adrenaline is another. And so what happens to us physiologically is we start, we become very kind of anxious. And so, and this happens in a microsecond, really. I mean, it's like, boom, there's no time for cognition. We'll make up our stories later. And it takes microseconds more well, I always knew that wasn't a snake. But to get to the prefrontal cortex where our thought processes begin takes a little bit longer. And so, and by a little bit longer, I mean a little bit longer. But by that time, we've already got these chemicals, going through our body. We're all stressed out. And so this is where it gets kind of interesting, because it's been proven that if you just leave it alone, these chemicals, they'll dissolve into our body within usually 90 seconds, 3 minutes tops. But if we make it into a story, like, I'm stupid for thinking that rope was a snake, or how dare that person leave that garden hose in the back lawn, it can go on for hours, it can go on for weeks. We hold grudges and so forth. So we end up if somebody cuts us off, which you can take as a kind of random event, and it becomes kind of like this. Wow. And I hate to admit it, but this is me sometimes. And it's so silly. I mean, and I'm sure you've seen people at stoplights who are just going ballistic, or in supermarkets for that person in front of them who's going too slowly. And so, so if you want to become this, if this is an aspiration that you have to become this sort of a person, then there's hope, because you can. And you just have to keep working with that anger, and you'll become more angry. But likelihood is that you probably don't. And so, and so you can kind of move away from that experience as well through mindfulness. Paul Ekman, who wrote about this extensively, talks about this moment as a refractory period. And so that's that period of time. I mean, there are times when it's not safe to hold a conversation with somebody, because what you're going to say is just going to be coming from this space of anger, let's say, okay? And so the refractory period is a period in which you're unable to take in information that is counter to whatever story you're telling, right? So the guy who cut me off, how dare he? I'm going to just go over there and, it can become a fight. I mean, people can go out there and start duking it out if they want to. So to be able to let that go and not become this might be a good idea for people like me. So what is mindfulness and how does this have to work? And I wish this were bigger, but you can online access this. This is from the Tree of Contemplative Practices that comes from a group out east. They work from the University of Amherst, the Society for Contemplative Mind in Higher Education. And I list them as one of my resources. And this tree is rooted in communication and connection. This is the soil from which a tree grows, and awareness. And when you look at this, you notice that meditation and contemplative practices don't only deal with sitting down and meditating, but movement as well. There's a strong mind-body component. So it begins with things like meditation, quieting the mind, moves on to things like reading, lectio divina, just like mindful reading, very quiet reading. Music and singing. Singing can be a great mindful experience, and you're using your body in a way there. So sometimes maybe if that person does cut you off, you pull out the Bob Dylan song or whatever it is that you like, and just sing instead. Journaling, yoga is up here. Work and volunteering. You think work and volunteering, how can that possibly be? That's giving me stress. And so this is the area when work becomes kind of the ball that's hit to you, and then how you work with that becomes important. And if you mess up, it's okay. So beginning kind of from the understanding that you're enough, which is a kind of startling statement oftentimes for people in Western culture in particular. So there's walking meditation, yoga, dance, which can be great. There's actually a group that will do laughing yoga. They call it laughing yoga, and the idea is just to get people laughing. I'm not good at it, but but if you just hear ha ha ha, and it can start from there. And I've seen people rolling on the floor. I mean, PhDs and Dartmouth. And so it's really a great, and what it does, it releases chemicals that counter the stress, and it releases chemicals that kind of encourage connection, which is part of what we're after. So the Center Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Group and I wish there were a clock in here because I want to be very cognizant of time. The Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Center out of the University of Massachusetts worked with people for an 8-week period who were either dying or were experiencing significant pain. And what they did is they gave them a program where for 45 minutes a day they worked with meditation and yoga. And so they came up with this definition. I'll tell you the results of the experiment of the moment. I will say that it has continued on. So mindfulness simply means paying attention in a particular way. It's just paying attention. And in a particular way means on purpose, in the present moment, and without judgment. And this is the last. They're all tough, but this is probably the toughest, without judgment. And in the present moment's tough too, because oftentimes our body is here, but we're time traveling, right? It's like, what will we have for dinner tonight? Or where did I leave my phone, which is where I am right now because I left it somewhere in this room. And so it becomes a matter of trying to be here now, being here right now. And so I'm actually going to do a really brief experiment of breathing. One of the focuses with meditation is on the breath, because this is something we can always return to. We always have the breath. It's been with us since we were born, be with us until we die. And so just returning to the breath can be a simple way of being present. And so here's the exercise, basically. If you can just take your right hand and put it to your stomach. So the idea is to breathe in a way that some of us have forgotten how to breathe. Oftentimes when people say, take a breath, it's all upper chest and it's all kind of fight or flight. But this is where you breathe like a baby. And so breathing so that when you take a breath in, and you breathe in through your nose, because our nose is connected to the tear ducts, which humidifies the air, and it has filters with hair and so forth. So the idea is to make your belly just balloon out like a baby's, and just take a deep breath in, and then a deep breath out. And keep your hand where it is so that you can notice the space when you push your stomach into your spinal cord. Deep breath in. Try to fill your lungs entirely, and out. Sometimes when we breathe out, there can be a sigh. It's a natural inclination, a kind of relaxation. Deep breath in. And out. 2 more. Deep breath in. And out. Deep breath in. And out. And just take a moment and do a self-assessment. How do you feel now? There's no right answer. You feel how you feel. But how do you feel now?
Very relaxed.
Very relaxed. So this is something that we can do all the time, just taking deep breaths. I mean, it's part of the cultural parlance. I'll take a deep breath. But to do it like, no, take a deep breath. It's all a matter of how you approach it. Yeah, we forgot how to breathe, and so this can be very helpful. In terms of the literature on mindfulness, and this only goes up through 2012, but you can see that in 1980 and 1981, I hope you can see that there was virtually nothing that was published in refereed scientific journals about mindfulness and education and science or science. But it really started booming with the fMRI in 2000, and it's taken off far more than it has. So the literature is rich out there right now. And the Center for the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Group has plenty of literature. John Kabat-Zinn has written a lot. They're bringing it into education more. There are books for education and children. Sitting Still Like a Frog, for example, by Thich Nhat Hanh's group is very good. Some exercises that children can become involved in. And so one of the kind of popularized book, although Richard Davidson is a very notable neuroscientist out of the University of Wisconsin, is this one, The Emotional Life of Your Brain. It's a really nice book. And I had the outcomes come from the book. And so basically what happens when we meditate, and he studied long-term meditators, people who had done it for 1,000 hours or more, but it tends to help us to become faster to recover from that person who cuts us off or that angry word that we thought we heard. So it kind of generates prefrontal cortex activity. Similarly, helps us with attention. When we meditate, we become much better at attending to things without distraction. The likelihood of us turning to the phone is a little bit less. None of these things are going to happen overnight. But this is again with long-term meditators. There's a form of meditation based on compassion. And so beginning with compassion for somebody it's easy to feel compassion for. And then moving yourself into that arena of compassion where you feel compassion for yourself. This might sound kind of airy-fairy, but they've discovered that regular compassion-based meditation will help build empathy, help build connection with other people. And frankly, I think that as teachers, as parents, kids, anybody can use a little bit of certainly self-compassion. And there's actually a group out there run by a professor at the University of Berkeley, which is self-compassion therapy, which has become, they do 8-week trainings around the country. And so Christian Neff, if you're interested, you can look up her book. Also, and this might be important as a reminder for us, but for younger people, students in particular, possibly the idea of clarifying what your values are. So if you're teaching students about education, educating younger children. Why? What are the motivations for this? What are your intentions in teaching this? And so clarifying what's important for you. And so these are just some of the outcomes. This is where my PowerPoint gets mixed up because it was new and improved this morning, but it didn't make it onto my flash drive somehow. But this will still work. So working with this is again from the mindfulness-based stress reduction group. We work with intention, and this kind of feeds off each other with attention. So you just make an intention for the day, for example. You make an intention long-term, short-term attention, and then the attitude that you take your failings with and your successes with is important as well. So non-judgmentally. And that, again, is really hard, but the idea that oftentimes my students will tell me, oh, I'm doing this all wrong. And it's like, no, you're probably not. That's your internal voice telling you you're doing things wrong. I won't say it that strongly, but I will tell them that you're really not doing it wrong. If you're thinking about your breath in this practice, you're doing it right. So bringing all of these things together. And these intentions will shift. And so I'm not exactly convinced that this is the way that everybody's path will take them, that they begin with this idea of self-regulation and move on to self-exploration. Frankly, I started with self-exploration. I took it on, oh, this sounds interesting. I had a friend who meditated, and so I just kind of, okay, let's look at this. It was a very psychologically based form of meditation that we'll practice a little bit later, very quick. And finally, self-liberation, but certainly intentions are dynamic and evolving. So one other thing, mind-body connection has become very important. I had you do the breathing exercise. This is Charlie Brown, and I don't know if you can read this, so I'll read this for you in my best Charlie Brown voice. This is my depressed stance. When you're depressed, it makes a lot of difference how you stand. The worst thing you can do is straighten up and hold your head high, because then you'll start to feel better. If you're going to get any joy out of being depressed, you have to stand like this. And so some of you may know Amy Cuddy. Her book was on the bestseller list recently. And what she has discovered is that there's kind of an inverse relationship between our bodies and our emotions. And so when we're feeling powerless, it's true, or depressed, we'll do this. But the opposite is true too. So if we're feeling powerless, what she's suggesting is that, and I'm going to feel a little bit dumb doing this, but not that. But like if you feel powerless, you take on a power pose for 3 minutes. You know, just stand firmly rooted and do the. You know, you don't do this in front of your classroom necessarily, but go into the bathroom or something, or stay in your office. And she's discovered that too. This victory, which is universal. I guess people who were born blind will do this if they win a race, but this can be an empowering stance as well. And so similarly with sadness, depression, for example, so doing just the opposite, like holding your head high, maybe smiling. Smiling is a huge one. Smiling is a huge one. And they've done studies with that as well, a great number. Could somebody just tell me what time? We're 8:45. 8:45, okay, I have to move with some alacrity. So the smiling child then to remind us that this can be contagious. And so, so the idea basically, and we're going to try a practice in a moment, is to mind the gap between stimulus and reaction. And there is a gap. And in fact, Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, talks about that. He said between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response as opposed to react. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. And so being able to work with that gap, and sometimes that gap it's like it's not there, right? And sometimes we can be more reflective. And so, but learning to work with that can be significantly important. One of the things that was on my PowerPoint, new and improved, that didn't make it on here was, I'm not sure where the quote comes from actually. There's different iterations of it out there. But it has to do with our nervous systems. And the best gift we can give anybody else is a well-regulated nervous system. our well-regulated nervous system. And so I'm thinking of with students, if you're in a classroom and everybody's looking at their phone and you just kind of go off because all the cortisol and adrenaline's up there, it's probably not a good moment, right? But it's not like a horrible moment either, it's just something you have to work with. But if you can learn to regulate, if we could learn to regulate our emotions in the classroom, that gets passed on. So it's a matter of we're teaching teachers, and they're teaching people who hopefully will become teachers. Teaching their parents, for example. I mean, there's a Holistic Life Foundation out of Baltimore. These really underprivileged kids dealing with incredible conditions. And they'll have a group of people who will come into their classrooms, and at the beginning of the day, we'll have them meditate. Some, the hardcore students, the ones who look like they might not make it through, do yoga, they spend more time with them, and they're there for them. And their nervous systems are well regulated. And they're passing it on to their kids. They're talking about mom's coming home from work, and she's really stressed out, and it's like, okay, Mom, just want you to sit down and breathe. And so, and here's what you do. And so breathing from the stomach and breathing out. And so these parents are coming to the teachers and saying, wow, you're really teaching our kids some great stuff. And the kids are teaching their parents some great stuff. So there's this kind of reciprocal movement that's really very lovely. So, so the idea then is to become more resilient, more emotionally resilient, and move from response, or rather from reaction, where you simply, to response. And so I have 4 simple practices that we can try out. And one is setting intention, and I talked about this in a moment, and I'll get back to that. Second, it's an acronym, obviously, RAIN, and we'll go through that as well. These are all very interrelated. They're all very kind of rooted in the same philosophy. Stoplight exam is a third, and simple meditation is a fourth. And so with setting intention, so possibly setting intention, I had a better slide too with this one. It was a woman holding up a blank sheet of paper saying, these are the resolutions that I know I can keep this new year. There's nothing on there. Anyhow. Setting intention can be a simple matter. And so one of the things that, this is a list that I just happened to come across, and they can be very small. And so I intend to laugh out loud today. You can do that right now. I intend to be valued today. It might be a little more difficult. I intend to be respected. I intend to be grateful today. So just once today, I'm going to be grateful. All right. And then do it. I intend to experience joy. And it was suggested that maybe during break you go outside and experience this day, and just maybe kind of feel the sun on your hands and your face and the breeze, and it's like, wow. So I intend to feel happy. I intend to experience a wonderful day. So the intentions can be relatively small. I intend to have fun today. It could be I intend to listen to a Bob Dylan song today, or whatever it might be. I intend to smile. So, but more important than intention is the action, and just this is a kind of like the body experience as well. So when you actually do an act of kindness, you're planting seeds more deeply. Letting someone go in the line before you. It's not a major thing at the supermarket. It's not a major thing, but it can have an effect on the person. It can have an effect on you. I'm sure you can all think of people in your lives who have done something insignificantly gentle to you, but it really made a difference. But the idea is not to get wrapped up with the intention or the expectation of what's going to happen because you let somebody go in line before you. So you just do it for your own sake and don't expect, a $1 tip necessarily, because then you might get mad. But to practice kindness, listening to somebody when they're telling you their problems is an act of, please.
So when you're setting intentions on the slide before this, can you, some of them I understand, because I feel like I would have control over them, but it's not like having somebody value me.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have.
I don't want to set intentions and then I can't control.
Right. No, I completely agree. So some people might think otherwise, but yeah, if you go in with the attitude of I want to be valued today, you're not feeling that. Like, yeah, it's about time to value me. So it's 10 o'clock. I haven't been valued yet. Yeah, so I think you're right. Those things you can control are really important. So smiling you can control, being valued maybe not so much. So first is rain, and this is a practice which you can do in meditation, or you can simply do as the day goes on. And it's not exactly parallel in construction, I recognize, but I didn't come up with this. But I think it can be useful if you can remember these. So first, it has to do with self-assessment, just checking in. How am I doing? Emotionally, physically, psychologically? What's going on right now? So recognize what's going on, and you can do it right now. Okay, how am I feeling? How's my body? Am I tense anywhere? Look at your face. Feel your face, neck, shoulders, hands. Just do a quick scan. Notice your emotional state. How am I doing? And if you care to investigate, would be the third step. What's going on with this anger? Okay. And then just letting it go. And again, non-attachment can be difficult, but just letting it go. But this is key because we know people who have hung on to the birthday present they got in third grade and they're 67 years old and they're still upset with their mom about that or something. So, but letting it go can be one of the most important things we do. And so starting again, and then just starting again, and then just starting again. So being in the present moment is kind of the key with this. Stoplight exam, it's very similar. Basically, it's this, when you're at a stoplight, and it doesn't have to be a stoplight, any place at all. But any place that you're stuck, just stop and do a self-assessment. Check in, see how you're doing emotionally and physically, and then let it go. And extra credit, smile. Students always ask for extra credit, so extra credit, smile. And even this, to send out a positive thought. So if somebody, this is my problem, I know. So if somebody cuts me off, to smile and then send them good vibrations. I'm not expecting that the person is going to be in front of me going, ooh, feeling anything. You're doing it for you, right? You're not doing it for them. So, but that's the stoplight exam. You can do that anytime you're stuck, any place you're stuck at all. So that's that. Meditation, if you're willing, I would like to kind of lead you through a brief practice in a very simple form of meditation. And if you're not willing, I'll simply invite you to do this, which is what you probably want to do to students if you incorporate it. Invite them to do it, and if they don't want to do it, it's fine. Just don't disturb other people. So, how are you with time?
20 minutes.
20 minutes left? Okay.
That's only till 9:30.
Thank you. Thank you.
Act of kindness. You get some so you've got
Points?
you got 30 minutes.
Okay. Okay. So this is going to be very similar at first to what we did before, and the idea here is that if you can sit in a way that's comfortable and grounded at the same time, so both your feet on the floor, you want to have your spine relatively straight. You don't want to make it uncomfortable. The key is that you're able to breathe freely, so breathe without encumbrance. And so first becoming aware of the environment, the sounds you hear in the room. And moving from the top of your head down through your body. And just notice, for example, your forehead. Any tension you might have there. And within your next out breath, maybe just let it go. Notice your eyes. Any tension there, just let it go. Your cheeks. Your mouth. A lot of people tend to clench their mouths, and so if that's the case, maybe just wiggle your lower jaw gently. Down through your neck, the back of your neck, your throat, front of your neck, the shoulders. We tend to hold a lot of tension in our shoulders. Arms. And just take the next few moments to kind of gently scan your body at your own pace and releasing any tension you may feel. And perhaps think of your whole body as breathing, maybe breathing out, breathing in through the top of your head, and then just sending that relaxing breath out through your fingertips, your chest, your legs, your feet, your toes, just letting go of any stress. And so the instruction basically is this. For the next few minutes, we'll try 3. Just try to focus on your breath. So first notice where you find that your breath is most obvious. Your nose, your throat, chest, it doesn't matter, but just notice, stay with that. And just watch it as it comes in on its own, not without trying to control. And if you find yourself trying to control, that's fine. But just as much as possible, letting your breath breathe itself. It helps some people to count. 1 breathing in, 2 breathing out. Counting up to 4 and then starting again so you don't get lost in numbers. And when you begin to find your mind wandering, just gently bring your attention back to your breath. Just gently, with kindness, bring your attention back to your breath. It's not like you're doing something wrong. It's just what the mind does. Just gently, like you're taking a stray puppy dog, putting it back on the lawn. And we'll try this for 3 minutes. Just breathing now. Nowhere to go. Nothing to do. And if it feels okay, maybe add that Smile, gentle smile. And when you feel comfortable, if you've closed your eyes, go ahead and open them when you're ready. Maybe do a quick self-assessment. What happened? Anything? Any
Well, you have the perfect voice to listen to that voice. But
So, you, more relaxed?
yes, my brain went everywhere. I thought about meditating in India. I thought about that movie Eat, Pray, Love. I thought about Passover Seder I have to go to. I was like, okay, then I'd be like, wait, stop. But my brain went everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't stressful.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
But it wasn't like I thought, my breath, it wasn't like I was just in my body breathing.
Anybody else? Thank you. I want to come back to that, actually.
I felt like I was in temple.
Really? Yeah.
This is how I grew up.
Uh-huh.
But it's really nice to hear about. It's really great that these kind of practices are things that people are talking about. Just hidden in secret.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to address that too. That's good. Thank you.
So do you do this with your college students?
I do.
Class,
I do.
regularly, at the beginning, at the end? I'd love to hear a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you integrate that?
I will. I promise. And I just want to say a couple of words, if I can, about what just happened. And so what you were talking about. These are four people meditating. One falls asleep, and the other three have chattery minds. And so it's not that meditation brings this on necessarily. Sometimes it might, but it might encourage it. But our minds are doing this all the time, and we seldom are undistracted enough to notice. So, yeah, so they call it monkey mind, and so, so thank you, incorporation, and I do want to talk a little bit about that. And the idea, first off, is to start simple. And I want to address what you were saying first. There's a line, this was in the PowerPoint, but it's gone. This is from a really nice book, The Heart of Higher Education, by Parker Palmer, who many of you probably know, and Arthur Zanuck. And they worked out of Amherst University and developed the Society for Contemplative Mind in Higher Education. And the book says, universities have forgotten their main purpose, which is to help students learn who they are, to search for a larger purpose in their lives, and to leave college as better human beings. And so he says further, a college or university is not just a place for the transmission of knowledge, but the forum for the exploration of life's mysteries and meaning through the careful but critical reading of the great works of literary and philosophical imagination, and I would argue what we're doing today. So exploring yourself. So I try to stress with students that this is really your class. This is about you. It's really about us. I think there's a very strong component in teaching this when that it has to be about us. It's not students versus teacher, it's us. And so I hope this quote made it into the final one, but if it didn't, I'll recap it as best I can. But starting simple. So I know some classes are better geared toward this sort of thing than others, but you're all in early childhood development. And so if you feel comfortable just ringing the bell or whatever it might be, just some kind of ceremonial thing to make it clear that class has started, and that whatever the expectations that you or the class has decided on will occur then, occurs then. And so I expect, and this is an expectation that remains usually unfulfilled throughout the day, that, you know, cell phones go off and people still don't worry about their other homework, but at least for a while at the beginning to ring the bell. And practicing what you preach. I think this is tremendously important, that as odd as this sounds, and the video put together by the Holistic Life Foundation, that group working out of Philadelphia, they mentioned that a key for them is that four-letter word, love. And so loving your work, loving your students, and appreciating their journey, being on their journey with them. So, so listening to questions that they have, listening to their experiences with an open mind. I mean, the act of listening is so difficult in our culture. It's so infrequent that we get somebody who really listens to you, right? And so to really listen to your students, it's a great gift. Instead of, you know, shelving your books, hey, I'm listening, just be with that student. And of course, starting with yourself, being with yourself more first. So this is the quote I was hoping I had. So it's not that teachers are sharing a philosophical approach to life with their students, with the participants, but they're participating with them in an exploration which is integral to their own life. And so I think the idea of teaching as though your life's depended on it. And I kind of think it does. This is important work. And so being with your students with presence, I like to say, and it's very simple, we talk about it, so we're all in the same boat, which is true. We're stuck here for 16 weeks, and here we are rowing down Rab Road in this boat together. I try to kind of build a sense of camaraderie with my students. So we're all in it together, and that means being vulnerable, I think, to a certain extent. So being vulnerable as a teacher. You don't want to come in and tell them, you know, your horrible day, but being vulnerable in a way that means putting yourself at risk a little bit. Not asking of students anything that you wouldn't that you wouldn't do yourself. So, so this is part of how we integrate it. So very, very simple. How you embed it into routines, I think, again, transitions are a really good way to do this. So if you move from one subject to another, we can say, okay, if you're, say, breaking into groups, even mindful walking. So just be mindful of your feet as they massage the ground and you walk over to the table. And so this transitions can be a very simple way to do this. At the end of the class can be every bit as important as the beginning of the class. Having students leave in a way that they're at least mindful for a second before they bolt out the door. And so to incorporate it regularly, it's like I said, I think there's a way in which you pass it on. Students will remind you if you haven't rung the bell at the beginning of the class. And in fact, if you can pass on that duty, you're part of this too. Remember, we're in the same boat, your time to row. And so ding, have somebody else ring us in. So it becomes part of a larger trust in both senses of the word, I think. So I will say that, and this applies for teachers as well as for students, so beginning with an awareness of the environment, that just the gravity on the chair, what the air feels like today, how your breath is doing. Sometimes we can take breaks, and again, this is easier in some classes than others. One of the classic mindfulness experiments is to have people eat a raisin mindfully. And so to feel the raisin in your hand and to recognize where it came. This is probably better for kids. I tried it one time and people were it didn't work for me. I have an N of 1, so I'm not exactly sure I'm willing to abandon it entirely. But feel how the raisin is in your hand and begin to explore the gravity and to think of all the work it took to get here, all the sunlight. Thich Nhat Hanh says, the poet in you will see the sun and the raisin and the earth. And so just to experience it as a found object and to feel it, starts to get gushy and put it in your mouth and feel the gravity there. So mindful eating, for those who do work with children, can be very helpful. Mindful objects, and that can be anything, right? Stones, the raisin, your breath, anything becomes an object. And so the idea of self-assessing, I think this is something that we can do continually in the classroom. It's not like, okay, it's 9:30, I'm ready to teach class, good, and then we're done. It's more an ongoing process. It's more an ongoing process that if you get thrown that question that you weren't expecting, what do you do with that? Pretend you know the answer, admit you don't know, ask for more. So just assessing what's going on. We've kind of experimented in small ways with these today, but one of the ones I really would like to point to, maybe as teachers, to help us to get centered, is the idea of that awareness of movement. And I will talk about how I've incorporated some of these things into my class, but the idea of you walking from your car, the major transition, right, from your car to the classroom. So if we're just rushing and our mind is racing, maybe just taking a time to kind of synchronize your walking with your breath and feel your feet as you might even want to try this out there if we take your break. Just kind of slowly, nobody notice what you're doing, maybe smiling. And so just an awareness of your presence on this earth. So, and then the thought process thing will come up anyhow. You'll become aware of your thoughts. Okay, I'm thinking these thoughts, and letting them go. So, just briefly, I will tell you that when I started the practice, I said it was with yoga practices with my class, and it took me 10 years so that it got to the point, at least 10 years, it took probably closer to 15, where I was actually involving my students in meditation practices regularly. So after the yoga stance, which was just kind of introduced and let go, I started practicing with my students. And this is kind of a Buddhist practice. And the idea was for every student who went up and gave a speech, I would kind of do the stoplight exam, see where I was, and assess, investigate a little bit, and let it go. But most important was sending out the good thoughts to every student. And the thoughts were, may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be free from suffering, may you be healthy. Every student. And so it began with me. And so even those students that I really wanted to drop, you can still drop. Even for them, just to keep practicing that, I found was really, really helpful. And so I finally, more slowly, started integrating it into the class with the bell. And then we tried brief meditations. And then I kind of earmarked my sections. And the marketing's not that great. People come in and think, we're going to what? Meditate? But I try to market it so that people know what they're getting in for. So we do yesterday we did a 20-minute self-compassion meditation. I have a yoga teacher come in, and one day we go off to the Child Development Center where they've got these really nice cork floors, and the students get on them, and they get taught yoga by a local teacher. They write journals about their exercises with mindfulness, their experiences, what's happening, and there's no right answers. I just want them to make the assignment their own, see what goes on with listening exercises, we're just getting through with a unit on self-talk, which is, I think, really important. How do you talk to yourself? what do you say? And one of my students, sometimes they come up with stuff, you want to write it down. It's like some great Zen book is just going to come out of these students. But one was saying, watching, this was 2 semesters ago, watching my thoughts, like watching the logs on a flume ride. They just start coming down, and then you see them go, and another one comes in, and then here comes the same one again. And you start to recognize, it's like, wow, yeah, it's so true. You start to recognize that our thoughts really aren't all that interesting sometimes. They're really they're not. They're just kind of like, I'm thinking about that, whatever it is, buying those new shoes again, boom, there it goes. And so it's pretty remarkable. And so that was one student. I had another student this semester say that sometimes he just becomes aware that he's alive and he's grateful for that. And it's like, wow. I had one student talk about how she opened up Windows and the little icon came up, and she was able to notice that the icon was divided into 4 sections, and the 4 sections were the 4 C's. She went into this long thing about being aware of what confronts her every day, and she was like, wow. And so, and it was a post that she made to the class, and I remember it ended with, "You might think I'm crazy, ha ha." It's like, no, nah, not at all. So, let's see, I think I'm probably, yes. So in terms of resources, I have here a list of organizations that you might think of exploring. There is the Contemplative Mind Association. There is this is the MSBR group, the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, and all of these places do workshops, they all have conferences, they all have trainings and so forth. Holistic Life Foundation, there's a great video. Look for the 18-minute video on YouTube, it's really wonderful. He has actually kids leading the participants through some exercises. Mindfulness and Education Network has an annual conference, they have a listserv. It's gotten kind of snarky lately, but they also have good articles and videos available. So there are these, and there are also some books that I mentioned. This has become kind of a cottage industry, but the Heart of Higher Education is a really good place to start for those of you who are teaching at the college level. Teach, Breathe, and Learn. This is a really nice book as well. There's one, Teaching Mindfully, Teaching Mindfulness, and so I list some of those, but if you go to Amazon, you'll find a whole slew of them. It's almost as though, a new book are being written every week, and it's probably close to true. The Zen of Teaching is another. I've got a whole group of references here, and available in the flash drive that you're going to get will be a, what is that called? Binder? Live binder. And so this binder is just loaded with research on on mindfulness and education. So yeah, so please take a look at that. You have to copy and paste the URL, right, to get a hold of it. And that's really all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Can you go back to the slide with the organization?
Yes.
How did you come to this way of being and thinking about adding this into?
For me, it was just the kind of disconnect between what I did as a practice and what I did in the classroom. I think it was much more like a discipline. You gotta stay in line, Jimmy. It's kind of like that, and I didn't really like that. And so I wanted to incorporate more of what I was doing in my life, because I thought it was important, not just for me, but for them. So I wanted to kind of combine.
I have a professor who does this all the time, and the students come away with such positive feedback about it.
Well, where are you? Where do you teach?
Western Illinois University.
Okay.
City's Andrea Hyde.
Yeah. What's his or her discipline?
And interdisciplinary studies.
Okay.
Interdisciplinary studies. Yoga in schools, she does a lot with that.
Interesting. I'd love to know more about that, actually. So if I could connect somehow, that would be great.
When I was sitting, and I was telling John, when I was sitting, lunch and breakfast, and they were saying
Anyway, we were talking about how many schools in Urbana schools they're just mindfulness training. All teachers are required to do this.
Really? And this is where?
That's what they said, Urbana.
Wow.
Oh, was it? I think it was Urbana, the school district.
The school district. Wow.
Yeah, that's what I understood, yeah. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Kids are great. I mean, kids are just, they can be right on it. And they don't need long either, so please.
What are your thoughts about, I'm aware of sort of some districts where they'll bring in or they'll use their school psychologists or social workers to work with the students with the mindfulness, and then they send them back into the classroom, but I don't know if they're really incorporating the teacher in, in that intervention in a
I mean,
sense.
so the students are pulled out from the classroom?
Oh, the students are pulled out? I don't know. I haven't heard of that before. I'd like to know what they're doing a bit more, I think.
My sense is they're missing a good opportunity to incorporate the teacher.
Yeah.
May not be as effective intervention if they aren't able to include, there might be logistic reasons and other reasons why they can't.
Yeah, sometimes the religion question pops up, and so everything that I do, it's very clearly secular. Well, maybe kind of fuzzily secular, but so yeah, but that's interesting.
I can't find it right now. I promise I wasn't scrolling through while I was listening, but there is a mindfulness and teaching through Facebook group that you can be a part of, and it gives specific strategies to use with young children, so it's mindfulness in school. It's been very-
So it's exercises for kids
Yes.
in classrooms, yeah. So-
Breathing, paying attention about, and they associate it with self-regulation.
And that's in your live binder, you've got a lot of like early childhood
Yeah.
recommendations, like classroom teaching strategies in there.
And Amy Salzman, too, is a good person who's done a lot of work with that. Her book just came out last year. No, it's 2014. Still Like a Frog, I think it is. But I think Parallax Press, and they work through Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Buddhist teacher, got the Nobel Peace Prize, but very interested in education. So anything that comes out of Parallax Press is worth your time. So thank you for that resource. So.